Imagine a world where xAI's Memphis supercomputer and projects like Grokipedia dictate the future of digital truth. xAI is quietly turning raw computing muscle into a market moat by firing up things like the Memphis supercomputer and scaling from H100 GPUs to Grace Blackwell units to rewrite what content intelligence can do. Today you will hear why that scale matters, how Grokipedia and MacroHard change trust and productivity, and what real-time generative media means for every viewer and developer. First, let's explore how raw hardware muscle and rapid deployment give xAI a physical advantage over its competitors. The simplest advantage is physical, not magical, because having hundreds of thousands of specialized processors buys you reasoning capacity and iteration speed that others struggle to match. In a 2026 YouTube talk, Solving the Money Problem points to massive training builds as the core of that edge. Speed wins too because it is not enough to own hardware. You must deploy it fast and keep it useful under load, otherwise the advantage fades. A 2026 YouTube segment underlines the race to bring more compute online faster than anyone else. Solving the Money Problem notes the urgency. At hyperscale, new failure modes appear, so engineering teams are building software that heals itself when switches flap or GPUs drop out during big runs. A 2026 YouTube clip highlights the practical reality of running huge clusters in places like Memphis and why resilience matters. Solving the Money Problem explains the setup. Second, let's look at how Grokipedia seeks to establish a library of truth by using curated human expertise. If compute is the engine, curated human judgment is the navigation system, because models trained only on raw web text will hallucinate in high-stakes domains. A 2026 YouTube remark about creating a modern library of truth shows the intent behind Grokipedia. Solving the Money Problem sketches the concept. Next, let's consider how on-demand GPU rendering is turning broadcast media into a personalized viewer revolution. Media itself is being reinvented, because with enough GPU horsepower, shows and games can be rendered on demand for a single user, not just broadcast to millions. In a 2026 YouTube segment, the idea of rendering videos in real time for each viewer is presented as a revolution for content. Solving the Money Problem lays out the vision. That shift makes personalization magical. And it also demands enormous frame rate rendering and low latency infrastructures that only a few builders can afford. Then, we'll examine how MacroHard's GUI native agents are reinventing productivity by interacting with software like humans. Agents that act like people on screens are the productivity payoff, because GUI native tools remove brittle API connectors and let models operate any software. In a 2026 YouTube clip about MacroHard, Solving the Money Problem describes agents that will handle tasks by interacting with interfaces the way a human would. Additionally, let's see how coding is being transformed into a native language for models to automate complex software engineering. Coding is becoming a native language for models so that debugging and changing large code bases can be automated, turning engineers into supervisors of autonomous software craft. A 2026 YouTube comment talks about building the best coding model in the world and the path toward autonomous engineering assistance. Solving the Money Problem remarks on the ambition. Lastly, we will discuss the multimodal feedback loops and the long-term vision for orbital data centers in space. Multimodal data from cars, satellites, and social platforms creates a feedback flywheel because images, voice, and telemetry together teach models real-world physics and human taste. A 2026 YouTube clip mentions ecosystem links and platform acquisitions that feed AI with diverse signals. Solving the Money Problem notes the strategic moves. Finally, the roadmap is not earthbound, because teams are already thinking of orbital data centers to push the limits of energy and cooling and keep scaling beyond terrestrial constraints. A 2026 YouTube excerpt outlines an orbital vision for future data centers and deep space compute expansion. Solving the Money Problem previews the long-term plans. So what should we learn from the rapid rise of xAI and its new software ecosystem? Here are 3 takeaways to keep in mind as xAI, Grokipedia, and MacroHard move from plan to product. First, xAI's Memphis supercomputer-style scaling turns compute into a defensible advantage that shapes who builds next-generation content and tools. Second, Grokipedia-style truth-seeking repositories plus expert evaluations will matter more than ever for medical and legal reliability. Finally, macro-hard and GUI native agents will redefine productivity by letting AI operate software like a human, making personalized real-time media and autonomous coding practical.